They told her she didn't belong there. She proved she was the only one who did. Her name was Amara Osei, 14 years old, 5 feet tall in worn-out boots. Standing outside the glass tower of Calloway and Vance Architecture Group on a Thursday morning in Chicago, holding a crumpled flyer she'd found taped to a library bulletin board. Junior Design Observation Program. All applicants welcome. She'd taken 3 buses to get there. The lobby guard stopped her at the revolving door. She wasn't the problem. She looked like the problem to people who'd never had to question the difference. Have you ever been turned away from something you were born to do? Then you already know how this story starts. Stay with me, because you need to hear how it ends. The building was 42 floors of glass and steel, thus the kind of structure that announced its own importance before you walked through the door. Calloway and Vance had designed airports in Dubai, bridges in South Korea, a waterfront district in Vancouver that won 3 international awards. Their Chicago headquarters occupied floors 30 through 34. Everything below that was other people's ambitions. Amara Osei was not supposed to exist in this world. She was the daughter of a Ghanaian bus driver named Emmanuel and a hospital cleaning supervisor named Grace, both of whom worked double shifts most weeks and still came home smelling like effort. They lived in Englewood. 2 bedrooms, 4 people, 1 bathroom that ran cold in January. Amara shared a room with her younger brother Kofi, who was 7 and obsessed with dinosaurs. The thing about Amara was that she saw numbers the way other people heard music. Not calculations exactly, patterns. She could look at a building and immediately perceive the load-bearing relationships, the stress distribution, the way weight moved through a structure like water finding its level. She didn't know the technical vocabulary for what she was seeing. She just saw it, the way you see color without being taught what color is. She'd been doing it since she was 6, looking at buildings, seeing their geometry the way most people saw faces. The library on 63rd Street was where she'd found the architecture books. Mrs. Abra, the branch librarian, had noticed Amara sketching building cross-sections in a spiral notebook during homework hour. She'd set aside graduate-level structural engineering texts without being asked. Might just left them on Amara's usual table like gifts without cards. Amara read everyone, didn't understand all of it, understood enough. When she found the Calloway and Vance flyer, she'd stayed up until midnight filling out the application by hand because the family's laptop was broken. She'd mailed it in a recycled envelope. She'd gotten a confirmation email 3 days later. Your application has been received. Report to the main lobby, Thursday, 8 a.m. She reported at 7:48. The lobby guard's name was Dennis Marsh, 53, 19 years at the building. He saw Amara come through the revolving door, and his hand went to the desk phone before she'd taken 3 steps. She's with the junior program. She has a confirmation email right here. Her name's not on my list. It's on the email. I need to see ID. I'm 14. And then I need a parent or guardian. The email says, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back from the desk." Ma'am, he said it to a 14-year-old girl the way you say it to someone you've already decided is a threat. 2 other visitors watched from the seating area. Neither intervened. Amara stepped back, pulled out her phone, reread the confirmation email for the 4th time, making sure she hadn't misread a date or address. She hadn't. She stood near the door for 11 minutes, waiting, hoping someone from the program would come down. Nobody came. She was too proud to cry in a lobby. She went back outside and cried on the sidewalk where nobody could see her face because she turned it toward the building and pressed her forehead against the cold glass. That's when she saw it. She wasn't crying about being turned away anymore. She'd stopped because something in the building's facade had caught her attention the way a wrong note catches a musician's ear. The structural grid on the northwest corner, the load distribution pattern visible through the glass curtain wall. Something was off, not catastrophically, not yet, but off in the specific way that a trained structural engineer would recognize immediately, and an untrained 14-year-old girl from Englewood had no business recognizing at all, except Amara Osei recognized it. She pressed her palm against the glass and tilted her head and counted the grid intervals with her eyes and then counted them again, and then took out her spiral notebook and started sketching, right there on the sidewalk in the January cold. because her brain wouldn't let her stop until she'd put it on paper. She was still sketching when a woman in a charcoal coat walked out of the revolving door on a phone call and nearly stepped on her notebook. The woman's name was Diane Calloway, 51, founding partner, the Calloway and Calloway and Vance. She designed 4 of the 10 most recognized structures on Chicago's skyline. Architecture magazine had called her the most important structural voice of her generation. She'd been to the White House twice, neither time as a tourist. She looked down at the girl on the sidewalk, then at the notebook, then back at the girl. "What are you drawing?" Amara looked up, saw the coat, the badge, the name. She should have said nothing. She said everything. Your Northwest load-bearing grid. The interval spacing shifts by roughly 8% between the 14th and 15th floor. It's probably thermal expansion from the original construction period, but if the building has settled unevenly on the north side, she paused, which it might have. The soil composition in this block runs softer toward the river. I read about it in a geological survey from 2019. She held up the notebook. I drew what I think the stress pattern looks like from the outside. Diane Calloway stood very still. How old are you? 14. Do you have a name? Amara Osei. I had an appointment for the junior program, but the guard said, "Come upstairs." The 32nd floor smelled like coffee and deadline. 12 architects in various states of crisis surrounded a conference table covered in blueprints, laptops, and empty cups. The project was called the Meridian Center, a $500 million civic complex commissioned by the city of Chicago. Concert hall, public library, municipal offices, all unified under one structural system. Groundbreaking in 11 weeks. The problem had appeared 4 days ago. The lead structural engineer, a man named Craig Delaney, 44, MIT trained, 17 years at the firm, had discovered a calculation error in the foundation load model. Not his error, it had originated with a third-party geotechnical firm 18 months earlier. But the liability landed at Calloway and Vance regardless. The error affected the load distribution across the entire eastern wing. Fix it wrong, and you'd have to redesign 6 months of work. Fix it right, and you had to find the correction first. They hadn't found it. And Amara walked into the conference room behind Diane Calloway, and nobody looked up. Everyone. Diane's voice had a specific quality. Not loud, but the kind that made rooms pay attention without being asked twice. This is Amara. She's observing today. Craig Delaney looked up from a blueprint. He was the kind of man who communicated skepticism entirely through his eyebrows. She's a child. She's an observer. Continue. The problem was on the screen. A load distribution diagram, color-coded by stress concentration, with one section in the eastern foundation pulsing an unhelpful shade of red. 3 structural engineers had been working it for 4 days. They'd narrowed it to a sector. They hadn't isolated the source. Amara stood against the wall. She wasn't supposed to speak. She was observing. She lasted 4 minutes. Which your tributary area calculation on columns E7 through E12 is using the wrong slab thickness. Every head in the room turned. She pointed at the screen, didn't approach, just pointed from across the room. That section is documented as 8-inch slab throughout, but the geotechnical report from 2022, page 41, the footnote, not the main table, notes that the soil remediation in that corridor required a slab upgrade to 10-inch in the eastern third. The load model never got updated. Your red zone isn't a design flaw. It's a data entry discrepancy. Silence. Craig Delaney's eyebrows had achieved something close to vertical. You can't know that from looking at a screen for 4 minutes. Page 41. The footnote is easy to miss because it references an appendix that was filed separately. I read the full geotechnical report online last night. Why were you reading our geotechnical report? I wasn't. I was reading all the public filings for the Meridian Center because I applied to the junior program and I wanted to be prepared. A younger architect, Marcus Webb, 29, pulled up the geotechnical report on his laptop, navigated to page 41, found the footnote. read it. His face did something complicated. She's right. She can't be right. Craig's voice was flat, defensive. We have 4 engineers who've been on this for 4 days. She's right, Craig. Marcus turned the laptop around. Look at the footnote. Slab upgrade, Eastern 3rd, effective load-bearing revision. He looked at Amara. If we apply the corrected slab thickness to the load model, your red zone clears, Amara said, and you'll need to recalculate your column sizing for E7 through E9 because they're slightly undersized for the actual load, but the correction is modest, nothing that requires redesign. Craig stood up. I need to verify this independently before anyone gets excited. Diane Calloway, who had not sat down since entering the room, watched him go. Then she looked at Amara. Sit down, she said. You're not observing anymore. Craig's verification took 40 minutes. The room recalibrated itself around Amara in the meantime. Not warmly, not coldly, somewhere in the charged middle where people don't know what to do with information that disrupts their understanding of who gets to be smart. Marcus Webb brought her coffee without asking, then seemed to remember she was 14 and replaced it with water. She didn't say anything. She drank the water. She looked at the blueprints because that's what her brain wanted to do, and there was no point in pretending otherwise. An older architect named Patricia Holt, 58, silver hair, the kind of woman who'd survived 30 years in a male-dominated field by being twice as prepared as everyone in the room, slid a separate set of drawings toward Amara. These are the acoustic panels for the concert hall. The contractor flagged a weight concern last week. We haven't prioritized it yet. Amara looked at the drawings for 90 seconds. The panel mounting brackets are rated for the panel weight as specified, but the specification didn't account for the resonance frequency loading during performance. Under sustained bass frequencies, the dynamic load could be 40% higher than static. Yet you'd want to upsize the bracket rating or add dampers. Patricia Holt picked up a pen, wrote something down, said nothing. What she didn't say carried more weight than what she did. Craig returned at 10:47 a.m. He stood in the doorway for a moment. The room waited. She's correct. He said it like swallowing something he wasn't sure would go down. The footnote, the slab thickness, the column recalculation, all of it. He looked at Amara. She was 14 years old, sitting at a table with a room full of people who had more combined credentials than some universities. How did you catch a footnote 4 of us missed? I read footnotes, Amara said. Most of the important information is in the footnotes. Someone laughed, not unkindly, the kind of laugh that releases pressure. And how long have you been studying structural engineering? Patricia asked. I've never studied it. I read about it. There's a difference? Formally, yes, the knowledge is the same. Patricia looked at Diane. Something passed between them. The silent language of 2 women who'd spent decades being the only ones in rooms like this. Diane spoke. Amara, where are your parents right now? The question arrived like weather. Amara's hands folded in her lap. My dad's driving his route. My mom's at the hospital. Can you reach them? Yes, I'd like to speak with them. With your permission, she paused, not perfunctory, genuine. Is that all right with you? Nobody had asked Amara if something was all right with her in a professional context before. The question sat unfamiliarly, like a chair sized for someone else. Yes, she said, that's all right. What Diane Calloway did next surprised everyone in the room, including Amara. She sat down, not at the head of the table, next to Amara, equal level. The way a person sits when they want another person to understand that the power in the room has just shifted. Tell me how you learned to see structures, she said, and Amara told her. It started with a church, Mount Calvary Baptist on 67th Street, where the Osei family attended every Sunday without exception. Amara was 6 years old when she first looked up at the vaulted ceiling and understood, without any language for it, that the arch was doing something, that it was working, transferring force from the center outward and downward into the walls, which were thicker at the base for exactly that reason. And as she'd asked her father why the ceiling was shaped that way, he'd said it was beautiful. She'd said yes, but also why. He didn't know. She didn't stop thinking about it for 3 days. At 8, she'd started drawing buildings in her schoolwork margins. Not the outsides of buildings, the insides. Cross-sections, as if the buildings had been cut open for her to examine. Her third-grade teacher sent a note home. Amara seems distracted in class. Her mother had looked at the drawings and said nothing for a long time and then said, "These are very good," which was all Amara needed. The library books came later. Mrs. Ibarra, patient and generous, who never once suggested that graduate-level structural engineering texts were inappropriate for a 10-year-old, who ordered additional volumes through interlibrary loan without mentioning it, who once said, "You're going to design something that outlasts both of us, child. I want to say I knew you first." By 12, Amara could calculate load paths mentally for simple structures. By 13, she could identify material stress points from visual inspection with accuracy that would have impressed a second-year engineering student. She didn't know this because she'd never been around anyone who could tell her. She just kept reading. The way you do when books are the only resource available and your mind refuses to stop asking questions. "Nobody taught you any of this?" Diane asked. "Mrs. Ibarra taught me that it was worth learning." Amara thought for a moment. That might be the same thing. The city's project director arrived at noon. His name was Gerald Okafor, 56, an imposing man with a political career woven into his architecture career in ways that made both more complicated. He'd been brought in to assess the timeline damage from the calculation error. He walked into the conference room expecting a status report from Craig Delaney. He found a 14-year-old girl at the conference table with a set of revised drawings in front of her that bore her handwritten corrections in the margins. "Who is this?" Craig Delaney answered before anyone else could. "This is the person who found our error." Gerald Okafor looked at Craig, looked at Amara, looked at the drawings. "She found it in approximately 4 minutes." Craig said it without pleasure, without pride, with the specific flatness of a man correctly recalibrating his understanding of something important. Gerald looked at Diane. "Is this a joke?" "It is not. She's a child, Diane. She's sitting at the table where we have a $500 million liability conversation. She's the reason we no longer have a $500 million liability." Diane's voice was pleasant the way winter is pleasant, clear, cold, completely sincere. "I thought you'd want to know." Gerald set his briefcase down slowly. "What's your name?" "Amara Osei. How old are you?" 14. "And you found a calculation error that 4 structural engineers missed?" "I found a data entry discrepancy. The calculations were right. The input was wrong." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's a meaningful distinction." "Yes, sir." Something shifted in his expression. Not softening exactly. Adjustment. And the recalibration of a man who'd seen enough of the world to recognize when the world had surprised him. "Walk me through it," he said, and pulled out a chair. She walked him through it. Clear, sequential, no hedging. She explained the geotechnical footnote and why it was easy to miss. She explained the slab thickness discrepancy and how it propagated through the load model. She explained the column recalculation and why it was modest. She explained the acoustic bracket issue as a secondary finding because it seemed relevant to mention. Gerald Okafor took notes. An actual notepad, actual pen. He didn't check his phone once. When she finished, he looked at Diane. "What's the remediation timeline?" "Craig's team can implement the corrections in 72 hours. "Hey, we're back on schedule. No delay to groundbreaking?" "None." Gerald looked at Amara. "Young lady, you just saved this city approximately 4 months of delays and the political fallout that comes with them. Do you understand that?" "I understand the structural part," Amara said. "The political part is less clear to me." He laughed, the first genuine sound in the room all morning. Craig Delaney found Amara in the hallway at 1:15 while the room broke for lunch. He stood for a moment, like a man deciding something. "I owe you an honest conversation," he said. She waited. "I've been doing this for 17 years. I have 3 degrees. I missed something that you caught reading a public document the night before. I've been trying to decide how to feel about that all morning." He paused. "I've decided to feel grateful. Aaron, and I wanted you to know." "Thank you," Amara said. "No." He shook his head. "Thank you. You saved us from a very expensive and very public failure." He looked at the drawing she was still holding. You're going to be extraordinary at this if you choose to pursue it formally. I'm going to pursue it formally, Amara said. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. It felt true in a way that things only feel true when you say them in front of witnesses. Craig nodded. Good. He went back into the conference room. Patricia Holt was behind him. She'd heard the exchange. He doesn't apologize to people, she told Amara quietly. In 17 years, I've seen it once. Diane Calloway called Emmanuel Osei at 2 p.m. He was on his lunch break between routes, sitting in the bus on a residential street on the north side. And Diane introduced herself, said who she was, said what had happened. Emmanuel didn't speak for a long moment. Is she in trouble? No, Mr. Osei. She's the opposite of in trouble. A pause. She saved our project. I want to talk to you about what that means for her future, if you're willing. Another silence. She drew buildings since she was little. We didn't always understand it. I do, Diane said. I drew buildings since I was little too. Emmanuel Osei made a sound that wasn't quite a word, something compressed and grateful and overwhelmed. I'll come after my shift. Take your time. She's in good hands. There was a moment around 3 p.m. when the afternoon light came through the 32nd floor windows at an angle that turned the blueprint paper gold. On the Chicago skyline hung outside the glass. Buildings Amara had studied from the ground, from the bus window, from library photographs. And she was inside one, at a table, with people who were asking her questions and writing down her answers. She thought about her brother Kofi and his dinosaurs, about how he'd collected plastic ones from the dollar store and arranged them by arrow on the windowsill, about how he knew everything about each one because he loved them and love made information stick. She'd loved buildings the same way. She thought about Mrs. Ibarra on 63rd Street, who'd left graduate texts on her table without announcement or explanation, who'd trusted a child's capacity before the child could articulate it herself. She thought about her mother coming home from the hospital at midnight, still in her scrubs. She's standing at the kitchen counter eating yesterday's rice because she was too tired to heat it, and how she'd looked up and seen Amara doing her homework and said, "You're going to go somewhere we haven't been, baby? I can feel it." Grace Osei felt things in her bones. She was usually right. Marcus Webb slid a new set of drawings in front of Amara at 3:30. This is the structural framing for the concert hall roof. Different challenge. The span is unusually wide, and the architectural team wants exposed steel. Aesthetic requirement, non-negotiable. We've been debating the best framing system for 2 weeks. What are the constraints? Deflection limits, acoustic performance, and the client wants the visual weight to feel light, which is a structural contradiction. Amara looked at the drawings for a while. Not a long-span composite trusses with asymmetric depth profile, she said. Deeper at midspan, shallower at the supports, controls deflection, reduces visual bulk, and if you orient the secondary members diagonally rather than vertically, you get acoustic diffusion built into the structural geometry. Marcus stared at her. Where did you... There's a covered market in Lyon, France, built in 1971. Same challenge. I read about it in an engineering journal from 1974. The issue was in the library's archive room. She paused. Mrs. Ibarra let me use the microfilm machine. Patricia Holt started laughing. Not unkindly. The kind of laugh that comes from genuine delight at the world. You read 1974 engineering journals on microfilm, Marcus said. The older journals have solutions they stopped teaching, Amara said. Yeah, everything old eventually becomes relevant again. At 4:45, Diane Calloway called a full team meeting. Everyone gathered, 12 architects, 3 engineers, 2 project managers on screens from separate offices. Diane stood at the head of the table. Amara sat to her right. This morning we had a liability that threatened the most significant civic project this firm has undertaken in 15 years. She spoke evenly. No theatrics. It was resolved by a 14-year-old who came here for a junior observation program and was initially turned away at the lobby. She let that sit for a moment. I want everyone in this room to understand what that means. Nobody spoke. It means our processes for recognizing talent are broken. Why? It means we nearly turned away the person who saved us because she didn't present the way we expect expertise to present. That is a problem I intend to fix. She looked at Amara. Amara, this firm would like to offer you a formal paid position as a junior design consultant, structured around your school schedule, with mentorship from 3 senior staff members, full access to our project archive, and a commitment to support your university education in structural engineering when the time comes. She paused. That is not charity. That is an investment in someone we would be professionally incompetent to ignore. The room was quiet. Amara said, I want to think about it with my parents. Of course. But I think the answer is yes. Diane nodded once. Good. Emmanuel Osei arrived at 6 p.m., still in his bus driver uniform, Mott carrying his jacket over his arm. He was a broad man with a quiet face and the specific dignity of someone who'd spent his life doing necessary work without recognition. He stood in the lobby, and the same guard who'd turned his daughter away that morning gave him a visitor badge without hesitation, because Emmanuel was accompanied by a firm partner. He rode the elevator to the 32nd floor and walked into a room where his daughter was sitting at a conference table, explaining something to 3 architects with advanced degrees, using a pencil to trace load paths on a blueprint. Emmanuel Osei stood in the doorway and watched his daughter for 1 full minute. Then he stepped back into the hallway. His eyes were full. He pressed his back against the wall. He was not a man who cried easily or often. He was crying now. Diane Calloway found him there. Mr. Osei. He composed himself, stood straight. I'm sorry, she's just... He stopped. She's always been drawing buildings, since she was small. I drove a bus. Her mother cleans hospital rooms. We couldn't give her. You gave her enough, Diane said. Whatever you gave her was enough for her to find the rest herself. He looked at his daughter through the conference room glass, still explaining, still gesturing at the blueprint. 3 architects leaning forward to see where she was pointing. She's going to be something, he said. She already is, Diane said. We're just catching up. The formal offer letter was on Amara's phone by 7 p.m. that evening, when along with a confirmation of the firm's commitment to university sponsorship through a program they created that same afternoon. Diane moved quickly when she decided something. Grace Osei received the news at 9 p.m., home from her shift, standing at the kitchen counter, still in her scrubs. She read the email on Amara's phone twice, then a 3rd time. Then she set the phone down on the counter and put both hands flat on the surface and breathed. Mama? Grace turned around. Her face was doing several things at once. Did I not tell you? Her voice broke at the edges. Did I not tell you? She pulled Amara into a hug that had years in it, all the double shifts and worn-out boots and library books on the kitchen table at midnight. I know all the hope that builds up quietly in parents who don't always have the words for it, but carry it everywhere they go. I told you, baby. I told you. Amara cried into her mother's shoulder. Kofi appeared in the hallway in his pajamas, suspicious of emotion. What happened? Your sister, Emmanuel said from behind him, his voice steady again, is going to design buildings. Kofi considered this seriously. Big ones? The biggest. Kofi nodded, apparently satisfied, and went back to bed. 3 months later, Amara walked into Calloway Vance on a Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. through the front door. The same revolving door. Dennis Marsh was at the lobby desk. He'd apologized to her on her 2nd day. Formally, uncomfortably, sincerely. She'd accepted it because she understood that people contain more than their worst moment, and she was trying to build a life large enough for that understanding. He greeted her by name now. Morning, Miss Osei. Good morning, Mr. Marsh. Her badge clipped to her collar, her name in official letters. Amara Osei, junior design consultant. The 32nd floor had given her a desk near the window. Not the best window. She hadn't earned the best window yet, and she understood that seniority was real and legitimate. But a window. Chicago visible in the distance. The skyline she'd studied since childhood. Now the skyline she was working toward contributing to. Patricia Holt had become her primary mentor. Twice a week, 1 hour, no agenda except Amara's questions. Patricia had more patience for excellent questions than almost anyone Amara had met. Craig Delaney had personally connected her with a pre-university structural engineering program at Illinois Tech. He'd written her recommendation letter himself. He'd shown it to her before submitting it, which she hadn't expected. "Is it accurate?" he'd asked. She'd read it and said yes. "Good," he'd said, "because every word of it is true." The groundbreaking ceremony for the Meridian Center happened on a cold March morning. City officials, architects, cameras. Diane Calloway spoke at the podium. She mentioned the project, the timeline, the team. She also mentioned a 14-year-old structural thinker from Englewood whose name was now in the project acknowledgments as a contributing consultant. She said it clearly, publicly, so it would be on record. Amara stood in the back of the crowd. Worn-out boots replaced now, but only barely. She didn't need the acknowledgement to know what she'd done. She'd known it from the moment she'd traced the grid anomaly on the glass outside, before anyone had seen her, before any of it mattered to anyone but her. But it helped. It helped to be seen, to have it said out loud in a public place by someone with the authority to make it permanent. Gerald Okafor found her after the ceremony. "You're going to design something important," he said. "I want to say I was there when it started." "You were there when you listened," Amara told him. "That's when it started for real." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Mrs. Ibarra heard the story from a Chicago Tribune article that ran 4 days after the groundbreaking. The journalist had found Amara through the firm's public announcement. The article was titled, "The Teenager Who Saved a $500 million Project by Reading the Footnotes." Mrs. Ibarra printed the article, laminated it, put it on the bulletin board behind the reference desk at the 63rd Street branch, next to the new architecture section she'd quietly expanded over the past 2 years. She didn't tell anyone why she was smiling for 3 days. She didn't need to. On a Saturday in April, Amara came back to the library. She walked in and found a 12-year-old boy sitting at her old table. Her table, the one by the window where the afternoon light was good. Reading a book about bridges. He had a spiral notebook open beside him. He was drawing cross-sections. Amara sat down across from him. He looked up, defensive the way kids get when they're used to being interrupted. "That's a good book," she said. "What, you've read it?" "Twice. The chapter on suspension bridge cable tension is the best part. Did you get there yet?" He hadn't. He shook his head. "It gets better," she said. She pulled out her own notebook. "Can I show you something about the diagram on page 43? There's a detail they don't fully explain." He pushed the book toward her. She showed him. Mrs. Ibarra watched from behind the reference desk. Didn't intervene. Didn't announce herself. Just smiled. Because she recognized what was happening. She'd seen it before. She'd seen it from the other side. Genius finding itself by passing itself forward. The narrator, steady, unhurried, speaks the final words. Amara Osei was turned away from a building at 7:48 in the morning. By 4:45 that same afternoon, her name was in the project documents of a $500 million civic landmark. Not because the world suddenly became fair. The world didn't become fair. Someone in the world chose to see past what they expected and look at what was actually there. One woman crouched down to look at a notebook on a sidewalk. That's all it took. One person paying the kind of attention that changes things. Right now there is a child reading something that the adults around her don't think matters yet. There is a boy drawing something in a school margin that a teacher will interpret as distraction. There is a girl on a bus stop bench doing calculations nobody asked her to do because her mind won't stop asking questions the world hasn't caught up to yet. The question is never whether the genius is there. The question is always who is paying attention. Subscribe to Dynasty of Hearts. We tell the stories that remind you who's sitting on the steps outside the door you haven't opened yet. Share this if someone saw you before you could see yourself. Comment below. Who was your Mrs. Abra? Who was your first Diane Calloway? The person who looked at you and said, "Come upstairs." We'd like to know. And to every child who's been told they don't belong in a room they were born to walk into, the building is already yours. We're just waiting for someone to open the door.